What is the significance of having the students say, this is what the apostles told me, or this is what we know, so close to all this material?
The point here is that the church is coming along and they are rooting this material in the apostles or those who follow with the apostles. Now again, let's assume you're making the rules. You get to make the rules. That's Jesus Anity's take is the church is making the rules as it's going along. They're doing theology on the fly. Okay, and so they come along and they say, well, we're not just going to have 4 Gospels that are written by apostles or associates of the apostles. We're going to have 4 Gospels. They should be written by apostles. Okay, so it seems to me if you were making up the rules and you're really trying to make it an apologetic, you know, that be untouchable, you'd pick 4 apostles to write the Gospels, not 2 apostles and then 2 who are associated with the apostles.
And one of those associates is an associate with an apostle who was not one of the eyewitnesses. In other words, Paul was added later.
Exactly right.
So Luke is 2 steps removed in that respect, plus what you noted already, that he's a minor player with
and there's
Luke's
another
partners.
inconsistency here that should be noted. Some people will argue that Mark reflects the gospel of Paul, and they pit the disciples against one another in this portrait. Matthew and Peter and James are on one side on Christianity. They're more Jewish. And Paul and Mark are on the other side of Christianity. They're more oriented towards Gentiles. And so Mark is associated with Paul in this model, and yet the tradition doesn't associate him with Paul. The tradition associates Mark with Peter. Okay? Well, apparently, Mark is a member of both the Democratic and Republican parties at the same time. So there are inconsistencies here in the way Jesus Anity portrays some of these relationships.
Yeah, and also this intramural fighting. The fact is, 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says, whether it was we or they, the fact is we were all on the same page talking about the same stuff.
That's exactly right. That this portrait of Christianity kind of being at odds within itself is exaggerated by those who argue for Jesus Anity. They have to do it. They have to bust up the Bible. If they can bust up the Bible as a historical document, then they've got room to posit all this other stuff about what Christianity is in the time. But if that Bible belongs together and those figures are connected to one another, then you can't go there. I'm reminded whenever I go to Rome or some of the places in Europe, how many paintings there are where you get Peter and Paul next to one another in one form or another. You know, you can walk into the Church of St. Paul and you see Peter and Paul next to one another. You see mosaics of Peter and Paul next to one another. You walk into St. Peter's Square, you've got a statue of Peter and you've got a statue of Paul. The church is saying something about the relationship of these figures to one another, and it's something that's been believed from the earliest days of Christianity.
Yeah, I think we got to again say that the fact is by 100, all of this apostolic testimony is written, okay? And the students of the apostles recognized it and basically said it. And they made a big difference between their teaching and this apostolic writing that they had. Now, it took a while for the church to understand what God had given them, what they actually were left. But they eventually did it, and it came back to the same criteria. Was it apostolic, or were these guys companions of the apostles? Is this the real stuff?